Video. Yeah, it's been a little bit of a while. Been redoing my computer stuff here, and so there's a little bit of video card noise. Anyway, it's not enough of a video card, but it might make a difference. Don't know. Still looks kind of laggy. But anyway, we'll live with it. It should get better once I get everything configured. Figure out what works best. Anyway, so the Dissident Science guy did make another video that was just kind of rubbish, so I thought I'd play some of it.
You yourself are an Einstein. You yourself.
But I'd rather just get to the overview of this whole subject of having a conversation about describing reality. That's the objective, I would argue, is to get accurate descriptions of reality, identify what is the right answer, or a good answer, or a complete answer, or a well-established answer. So kind of like the evolution thing, where you get a little bit of evidence, little indications or here or there. You find out there's monkeys in the world, and you say, ooh, that's kind of creepy. They act and look a lot like us. Kind of indicating something. Then you compile a whole bunch of evidence that other animals are doing the same thing, blah, blah, blah. Then you get DNA evidence, you get all kinds of other evidence, and you basically establish that, yeah, this is how it happened on Earth, this progressive change. And it's a good theory, complete, in my opinion, complete enough to demonstrate the concept. It's proof of concept. Whether there's still other details to be learned, sure, maybe. But the big picture is written and well established. Now, physics doesn't have that. It has very weak evidence, doesn't have any minkies to point to. It just has little tiny weirdnesses that exist. And, they've, in my opinion, jumped to conclusions, and really jumped. Not just a little jump, but big giant jumps into multiverses and photons with radar and even the relativity argument. You find a relationship between velocity and a change in how matter functions, and they've turned that into an excuse to turn time into a bendable dimension, that somehow it's being warped by events. So the outside world is changing, not the inside world. Again, the clock's breaking, and they just keep saying, no, reality broke. Wrong conclusion. Jumping. I'm sitting here in hindsight now. So it's like I'm back 200 years ago or 250 years ago, and I've already been to the future, and I saw the DNA evidence, and I saw all the other kind of evidence. And it's like this evolution argument should be over. This is over. From my perspective, all you want to do is create a model, an explanation that fits the evidence in a rather complete way. And there's only certain things you have to, there's only certain things to this project. There's gravity and magnetism. I'd say those are the two biggies, and those are the two that conventional physics provides almost zero mechanism. There's just none. Yes, we've detailed the effect, but they have no clue in terms of drawing you a cause. Nothing. Oh, it's a magical pull thing. Matter does it. It just pulls stuff. It bends the space and forces the stuff to roll into it, or whatever. It queers the geometry, and the geometry tells the matter where to go. So it's just crap as an explanation. And the third one would be electricity, which is a manifestation of magnetism, and really just has to do with what happens when force is inside a conductor, and not free. But it also you can recognize the distinction between the dipole, the magnetism, and the monopole, which is charge or electricity. And that's it. That's physics. And to do those simple things, describe what's happening in electricity, magnetism, and gravity. They've created two different physics, relativity and quantum mechanics, and both of them are horribly evidenced. I mean, just the evidence is horrible in terms of its weakness, to defend what they're saying. So anyway, so back to this. So he's criticizing people for going it alone in terms of developing better explanations, counter theories. And let's understand the reason why counter theories make sense is because the established theory doesn't make sense. It needs a better answer. It's screaming, there's got to be a better answer. So let's not pretend the door isn't wide open saying, find me a better answer. And so he's critiquing people for working alone, which I don't think is necessarily their preference, but it is pretty hard for people to work together. How exactly do you do that unless you have an Igor? Competing Dr. Frankensteins aren't going to work together. It was even in the movie, right? The other guy wanted to use chemistry, and Frankenstein wanted to use electricity. Competing ideas that you can't make them work together. You can't make a particle and ether theories really work together. So, this whole idea that somehow we're missing the great advantage of togetherness when you can't do it. And it's never been done in human history. There's no examples of it. You have people who work for somebody, but there's I don't think there's any examples of, great physicists working together to accomplish a task. Where's the example? Ever. I mean, ever. Do you have any examples? I mean, except big finance projects like LIGO or the Collider thing. And again, that just ends up being a hierarchy where a couple of people get Nobel Prizes and everybody else gets crap. It's hardly a collaboration. So anyway, he says mad scientists working in isolation. So again, he's using this stupid old rhetoric that because you spend a lot of time doing something and you don't pay attention to combing your hair or some other bullshit, because this is what you do. This is a real project. It's a problem to be solved, and some people are quite obsessed with it. I'd argue I'm sort of obsessed. And I think rightfully so, just because I think I'm on the right track and there's every reason to be obsessed. What's wrong with that? That's exactly what all the great scientists of the history were like. I mean, how is that pattern? It's not just Einstein. They were all eccentrics. They all had their quirks. You go from Newton, I mean, through all of them, they all had personality defects because they were devoted to doing this. They weren't looking for cheap thrills. They had a project in life, and that's what made them good at it, is because they kept trying and trying and trying and trying and trying. They didn't give up. Anyway, it's just stupid. Einstein was the prototype for the mad scientist working alone. So again, he wasn't. Newton was. Rutherford. You can go through the whole list. All of them worked essentially alone. So what is this rubbish? I mean, there's just no evidence of something else. How else? I mean, Huygens, who I don't really appreciate much, he was a clockmaker. And this was his other obsession, was thinking about this other stuff, so physics and all that stuff, complete amateur. And, and they all, like I said, they all had the Einstein isn't the prototype. Einstein's just another representation of what works. Grand illusion, we have found the key to the universe. So he keeps thinking that that's not what you're going to do. That somehow I should have some other project in mind. That the point isn't to replace what conventional physics has done, which is wrong, which is jump the evidence with wacky, wooey explanations. No, my project should be something simpler, like how to make a better snap, or better paper clip or something. What's your silly point here? So if I have a theory that does unify gravity, magnetism, and electricity, I shouldn't think it's an illusion. It's all fake. You know somehow. Somehow you know that can't be right. That these can't be done somehow. Or if it can be done, only you can do it. I mean, you're just so full of shit. These are all emotional responses, not logical ones. I just don't understand. Why should if no one provides me a counter? Look, I've provided you counter arguments why your theory is garbage. You've responded to none of them. I haven't heard one peep out of anybody else making any kind of rational argument. Like, go to my magnetism video. I'll leave the link here. Okay? And explain how it's flawed. How that explanation doesn't perfectly fit the evidence. Just explain how it misses. I mean, this accusation that somebody's being illogical is repugnant when you don't back it up with anything, like a rational argument explaining why what they're thinking is wrong. So anyway, let's play this crap.
And yes, you don't have a degree, but it didn't matter with Einstein, so it shouldn't matter with me.
It didn't matter with Huygens. It didn't matter with a lot of people who didn't have degrees. So again, this just doesn't matter, this degree thing. Well, Huygens was pretty well educated, actually. I don't know what his degrees were in, though. I mean, obviously they didn't have a physics subject back then, probably.
Of course, the grand illusion, we have found the key to the universe. And that's one of the things that when we work in isolation, that happens.
No, it really doesn't. I mean, I started with a theory of gravity. All right? That's what I started with. That's what I made this channel. When I made this channel, I didn't have a unification theory. I didn't have the key to everything theory. I didn't have any of that crap. I had just the argument that gravity has got to be a push and it's got to be a particle and it just makes sense. It fits too well to ignore it. I mean, it just fits too well, mock gravity. It works too well not to be the right answer. That's all I started with.
And I'm not saying that you don't, but I'm saying
yes, you are. What else are you saying? You're saying that somehow you're deluded and you're living an illusionary life and you're this and that. You're making a critique. You're making a statement saying somehow you're wasting your time and you're delusional. I mean, illusion isn't much different than delusion, is it, David? You're supposed to be a vocabulary expert. You understand that those two words are almost interchangeable, right?
Idea that you have found the key to the universe, the key to the answer to the biggest questions in physics. That really is much stronger, as my contention, emotionally. You're much...
Again, what does this have to do with emotions beyond the fact that you say eureka, and that you have a feeling when you say eureka, I found it. But your argument is vacuous in terms of stating how somebody didn't find it. I mean, I can argue that they haven't found it yet. I could argue that when Darwin put it all together and drew the evidence picture, you know, he kind of earned saying, Eureka. You know, so this is just horseshit.
More likely to think that, to believe that, to go in that direction if you are working a lot in isolation. When you work with other people, they're going to...
Yeah, so again, this working with other people, you get plenty of critiques on the internet. I mean, even those little conference rooms are pathetically unuseful in the sense that all you get is stupid rags. You don't get anything like a really good argument. So this idea that somehow you're going to be avoiding, you're the one avoiding, again, I'll just say it again, you're the one avoiding the questions, the critiques of your propositions and proposals. You're not paying any attention to the counter arguments. So what good does making them to you do? It's a waste of time. I at least deal with the critiques posted on my videos.
Slap you into waking you up and say, you know, it's a good idea, but there's some of these problems that'll sort of keep your feet.
Yeah, whatever. So there's sort of these problems. That's you're just so vacuous in your description of any of this stuff. So even your criticisms of conventional physics, they lack any detail. They lack any explanation of why. Then how come this experiment? You don't really understand a lot of the fundamental experiments that found all this stuff anyway.
On the ground, but I'm not supposed to be talking about those things right now. I'm talking about the illusions of working in isolation. These, of course, are all emotional responses. They are not logical ones.
So again, more mush, just mush. What the fuck could that possibly mean? I mean, it means nothing in this argument. You have different models. People are proposing different models. You critique the models. What does this have to do with emotions? Stupid.
And I think that's one of the problems when we work alone. We'll decide, maybe we found it. And of course, that's what happens oftentimes.
So again, give me the example of people not working alone. Show me where that works somewhere in human history. Give me your examples of the collaborative efforts. Michelson Morley, maybe? So two guys that had the same exact notion for one specific thing, but they split up shortly after that experiment because of their disagreements. So, where are you going? Where are you going with this argument that anything gets done that way? The Wright brothers, I mean, they were brothers. That's probably why they worked together, because it was freaking brothers.
Sometimes people who have been working in isolation find our group and then they send us an email. I found the answer, look at it, make sure your group knows about it, and they will do what they want with it. And I have nothing to do, and I don't want to have anything to do with your group because this is the answer. Well, let's see if they...
So again, if anybody wants to have anything to do with your group, you're clearly hostile to anybody who is hostile to your preferential players. So as soon as somebody says a bad word about one of your icons, they're out of the group anyway.
See it, because if they see it, then they're an enlightened group, and then they'll worship me by being the guy who found it all, or whatever. So again, they're all emotional sort of responses to working in isolation.
It's retarded. You're not making any responses, and you don't do any real criticism. You just vaguely say, well, it's a theory, and it's okay, and it's but it has problems, and you just leave that vacuous. Like what?
Isolation, in my opinion. And now we get to, you notice that the text got smaller and the bullets got more numerous. Well, there are negative aspects of isolation. And these are the list of things I put together. Your work becomes brittle. Well, that's because you...
Mush, more mush. No examples of this at all. No tying it to anything. No, just talk.
Often... stay in there. Being brittle, you don't have any new ideas coming in. You are constantly thinking of your own.
So again, that's just more nonsense, because all the scientists of history always paid attention to other experiments other people were doing, what they were saying, what was going on. Complete nonsense. Nobody's isolated in the sense they're off planet or something. So just more rubbish. Somehow nobody knows what's going on. And to use myself as an example, I clearly spend a lot more time watching other people's content than you do. So clearly I'm more aware of their theory in a deeper way than you are.
Theory in your own way with your own system, and then it becoming brittle means you will end up going on the fringes. Maybe it's just the...
More just ambiguous nothing, no examples of this. So why don't you use some citation? Why don't you cite some examples of this mush? There's a whole bunch of people working on that electric universe stuff. Do you think that's working? Do you think they're actually getting somewhere? Huh? Do you?
Working in isolation, that happens. Falling in love with your ideas, that's going to happen way more, like I said, if you're working in isolation. Of course, over-applying your...
So, again, isolation in what context? So who are you talking about? Who's in isolation? I mean, clearly you can't use me as an example, because I'm clearly not isolated. It's that I'm making videos almost every day. Hardly isolated.
Your ideas and systems to the universe, because like, oh man, this is great. Ether describes everything, so maybe I can describe gravity. Everything's ether, or everything's electric, or everything's...
Well, obviously, if there was an ether, it would sort of have an everything consequence, I think. Because that's one of the big misses of conventional physics, is the idea that they separated these forces, and these forces are just manifestations of each other. So I think that's a statement that I really can't see how a reasonable person could say, even if they were kind of glued to a bunch of conventional notions, how they could disagree that there's a certain commonness, the fact that all the forces move the speed of light, and there's certain things that just kind of scream that these are all just manifestations of some underlying function, some more elemental common function.
Magnetic, or everything's particles. See, I put myself in there. You thought I was just going to pick on everybody. Nope. Everybody but me. But I'm picking on myself as well.
How so? You're just going to sit there and say, I think I have the right answer, so you people I just shut up because I'm right. That's all you're saying. You're not making an argument of any kind.
Not benefiting from a second opinion, other brains looking at the same problem. That's really important that we do that. Why? Because that's how we...
Again, I don't know how important it is, because frankly, everybody else's conceptions of reality are either poorly motivated, in that they're trying to find God in the physics, or it's just made up. It's another, let's just jump the evidence with some wooey jellyfish theory. You know, there's an elemental jellyfishing, and that energy is what makes all the other stuff happen, is the motion of the jellyfish.
Ourselves are going to move ourselves forward. The idea that we can do this all on our own is an opinion, but in a lot of senses...
Again, that's how all the progress basically throughout human history has been accomplished. Galileo, you can go right through the list. Where's the crowd that helped out? There was no crowd helping out. And again, if there was a crowd, they would just be helping out. I mean, there really is a certain kind of person who finds the truth, and it's not a group that does it.
You're not going to benefit if you're by yourself from a second look, a second opinion. Missing key research and work from others that could greatly benefit your work.
So again, what key research being produced by any of these flakes? All I see them doing is hyping crap, or telling bizarre stories that can't have a grain of truth in them, like Bill, or Bob, or whatever the hell his name is. You know, just keep making crap up. You know.
Is huge. To put this lightly, this is exactly why my father and I even have a model. I looked at all these amazing things that I sort of collected along the years from these amazing scientists. I didn't come up with them.
So he thinks it's amazing to do the Horton Hears a Who thing and assume the universe is somehow infinitely retarded. That is, it somehow, because you can't imagine a beginning, you just pretend there was no beginning. And you pretend the universe, because it's hard to see the smallest thing, you just pretend it gets smaller and smaller and smaller forever and ever and ever, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger forever and ever and ever. And it's, you know, it's just that's what kids do. It's a kid's story.
With the underwater experiments you nailed anew, I didn't come up.
So again, just complete rubbish. So he thinks that number one, totally unremarkable. I'm sure somebody 100 years ago knew of this phenomenon, that whirlpools create, you know, repulsion and attraction, a very slight amount of it, vortices. Nothing amazing about this at all in mediums. And it can't possibly explain forces like magnetism, which are intensely powerful because of the amount of energy wasted in all that swirly crap. It's 1 in a trillion in terms of its efficiency quotient. You get 1 quantum of energy for a trillion quanta wasted.
With the idea of infinity and all the levels of the universe, I didn't come up with the idea.
Yeah, I mean, so you see, here he is reciting a bunch of totally stupid and ludicrous crap that's just made up, and then talking about how, see how working with other people works so well? No, your example is an example of failure, not success.
That gravity was a particle. That came from Karazani. Infinity
didn't come from Karazani. It came from Fadio 350 fucking years ago. Shit.
It came from Borgard. The new effect came from UNL Deneau, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all those things.
So again, the Deneau effect didn't come from Deneau. So like I said, I'm sure somebody wrote about it 150, 200 years ago. It's not a spectacular thing to recognize that two tornadoes might run away from each other a little bit. You know, they might be attracted or repelled based on which way they're spinning. Wow, what hugely insightful. Not even close.
A wave particle theory, a wave particle duality. My father solved it. I just went nuts when I saw it. I thought,
he solved it. He didn't solve anything. He's, you know, and this making a photon into a trillion quantaton, and then creating some wacky other force that bends photons. The moving c² force. I think that's just made up. I don't think there's a shred of evidence for that. A shred.
I got that. And so all those things, that's why we even have, I mean, they wouldn't even exist. And I think one of the reasons it's so robust, our model.
See, look, so he's hyping his own bullshit while he's degrading everybody else in this general sense. You're all failures because you're not working with your daddy. Or some kind, or, you know, you haven't stolen a bunch of other people's ideas and cobbled them together to make your own little Frankenstein, so you're therefore failures. Fuck you.
It's because we're standing on other people's shoulders today who thought a lot about things that
so again, I don't see any of that. I'm sorry. I don't. There might have been people who were quite insightful and brilliant, but yeah, because the gang said no, we're going with this idea of waves and you know, dualities and all this other shit. We don't even know those other people exist.
We didn't have to, and we of course examine those, but we find out. So you're missing a lot of that key research, and of course data.
What key research? What key data? I don't think you're terribly informed on any of the fundamental experiments. Again, any of the experiments that are the foundation. I don't even think do you really understand how bad the Eddington experiment was? Have you even looked into it at all? You know, the one proving that photons are bent by gravity.
Sometimes people will find, like, I remember when I was really harping on expansion tectonics from 2008 on.
Yeah, well, whatever. It's amazing that you've been harping on this for so long because it's such a stupid idea on its face. Again, and making extraordinary claims with less than ordinary evidence. If that isn't a crime against science, then what is? I mean, that's exactly what takes science and perverts it, is this, well, I'm going to just make up crap, make claims, and I'm not going to found them with any kind of reasoning that's attached to any kind of real event that ever happened on Earth.
Literally dozens of the scientists in our group had no idea that that even existed. We had people before, yes, talking about that, but for some reason they weren't there or whatever, and then all of a sudden they think, oh, we've got to answer this big mystery of why the Earth's gaining mass, most likely at a subatomic scale.
Most likely on a subatomic scale. Who cares on what scale it is? How are you going to explain it? Again, you don't have any explanation for it, and why we don't see it, and why there's no evidence of it. It's just stupid.
The second to last point is others could advance advance parts of your work beyond what you yourself are doing.
The generosity of their heart or something? Again, where do we have examples of that? You have to have the debate, you know, and at least in the past they had those debates. You know, Newton had to defend what he was saying against the critics, and he had a chance to do that. And, you know, we don't have that chance anymore. There's no society for the preservation of truth that gives everybody an opportunity to make an argument. It's a very closed ivory tower kind of world now.
And that's what we're doing. We're taking the ideas of others and we're advancing them further, and we're using their work. And that can happen with you. You could put together.
Oh yes, you could put together a pile of crap using what? I should listen to. I should take Dullard's ideas or Ken Wheeler's wacky hyperberloidy bullshit. What are you talking about? Point me to this good theory, this good research out there. It doesn't exist.
all this whole thing, and you could have had a key, which was a key to a point of something else in somebody else's work. They end up finding the model. They end up being famous.
Yeah, when does that happen either? So again, it's just more blah 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 blah. Somehow you can predict the future based on no rational sequence of facts. There's no facts pointing to that's how it's going to happen, David. No facts. No set of facts points to anything you're saying as being true. I predict your predictions will be very bad predictions.
It's like, yeah, you're sitting in isolation. You didn't get out there. They did what you could have done if you would have stood up with others. Illusion that you can dump your work upon the world and it will embrace it once every month or two.
Yeah, that's not even the objective. Again, the idea is not to embrace it, but if you're going to say it's wrong, then say it with some sort of rational reason why it's wrong. And don't say something stupid like, well, it's not ether. Ether can come from nothing. Your particles can't come from nothing. What do you mean they always existed? Only ether can always exist. I mean, the hypocrisy of people's critiques is just so obvious. You know, they hold your theory to completely different standards, and they hold their own wacky theory.
I get an email out of the blue of somebody who looks on the internet and finds our group and says, here, enlighten yourself, let me know if you're grouping. So I've already talked about that. Again, talking off points, off bullets, can't even read them, wasting your time. Get on to the next slide, Dave. Positive aspects of networking. So, what are the positive? Get others' opinion about your work.
Yeah, and where can you do that? I'm just saying. I mean, frankly, you kicked me out of the conference room. Why? Because I critiqued other people's work. You're not allowed to do that. It's a simple answer, right? It wasn't any more complicated than that. And then what's the example here? I've solicited, I've even offered people money to debunk my videos. No takers. How exactly, I mean, who else is making videos and who else is open to video exchanges except for me? I'm saying, look, I'll make a video. I'll critique your fucking video. Well, why don't you try to do the same thing to me? You know, why couldn't that work? You know, no, you people aren't interested in arguing. And that's what it's going to take, arguments. You have to have arguments and then counter-arguments and arguments, counter-arguments. And you people are completely averse to that process.
Find problems with your work. That's a big one. That's a big one. There are a lot of people who've seen lots of different things, and they can see your work better than you can see it yourself. And I'm not talking about that you don't have a unique idea. I'm talking about fundamental things like maybe you make it.
Well, show an example of it, that's all. Show me an example of the critiques that were really good and insightful and got right to the point and got to the heart of the flaws in the theory. Show me that shit somewhere. So I don't see anybody, me doing that.
An argument against the mainstream, and your argument against the mainstream is not good. You need to rework that one. That's one I see often. Find new ideas and data from others.
Yeah, and look who's talking. He makes a movie called Einstein Wrong and didn't demonstrate a damn thing about how Einstein's wrong. I mean, just showed some cranks talking gibberish about, well, he didn't put a period at the end of this sentence, and so this whole sentence is discounted because there's no period. I mean, you know, the trivial critiques.
Work. Yep. And that's what it's sort of in the negative part of the positive parts. Like I said, our particle model completely exists because of other new ideas and data from others' work.
And everything that's wrong with it is based on that. Your preference for your infinity nonsense has got you thinking there's forces moving twice the speed of light. You know, the speed of light squared.
Up to date with all the data and other sources because they advance, they change. The electric universe. Einstein's wrong, you NPA people. Ha ha ha, you guys are wasting away. You guys are crazy. 10 years later, you use the electric universe are doing lectures and supporting
religion, essentially. They're supporting some wacky notion that primitive tribes 4,000 years ago had a better grasp on reality. I don't think so.
Scientists who in fact say Einstein is wrong, and they're even starting to talk about what gravity perhaps is explained by the electric part of the universe.
Yeah, which can't explain gravity because there's no frickin' conductor in space, and electricity can't travel through empty space, because electricity is pretty much the exchange of pressure between atoms. And that's what it is. The force has to move between the atoms.
Find someone like-minded to work with you. That's a big one too. My father and I are absolutely like-minded. I don't know, maybe because again we grew up making all kinds. I made some mechanical things. We're very mechanically inclined, so I think that's part.
Yeah. What, does he also believe in this infinity crap? And does he also believe the Earth was the size of a walnut or something?
So, yep. I mean, I found it in my own household, but it had to take him to the CMPS for this sort of whole thing to happen. And he actually, cooperation was one of the reasons he came up with his solution for the particle wave duality, or the wave particle duality. I guess it's the same thing.
Yeah, his solution is to pretend there's no such thing as charge, and what's the other thing? Oh yeah, and to turn photons into insanely complex matrices of volumes of stuff instead of just bullets at a distance, which is the obvious answer. Obvious in my opinion.
So finally, in conclusion, isolation or networking, well, both are necessary.
The two things aren't even the same conceptually. I mean, what are you talking about? Collaboration or networking? I don't think those are different things. And again, nobody wants to do that. I mean, nobody wants to be your Igor. Okay, so, you know, I mean, I did solicit collaborators. I mean, I have the emails. The Miles Mathis guy. I just figure, look, there's enough of what he's saying, at least his critiques of conventional physics, for me to say, yeah, this might be valuable. But he wasn't interested. I'm just saying nobody was interested in collaboration when I attempted to solicit it. So what's the point? Where do I go to find these people desperate to collaborate? Where do I find that?
And if you say isolation works, and that works for me. Well, isolation for periods of time is absolutely essential, yes. Networking for periods of time is greatly beneficial.
And what is networking? What does that mean? It means you lie. Oh, I love you. You're so special. Oh, it'd be so cool if we could, work together. Oh, yeah, I love your ideas. And when I don't. Is that it? Is networking just lying, isn't it?
And I will make a prediction that the next big theory or model will not come from isolation alone.
Okay, I'll predict you're wrong as fuck. You want to bet $1 zillion? Because, yeah, you're going to be so frickin' wrong. Wrong.
Will come from those who both work in isolation and who network. And I mean, that is really important. And the networking will keep their work.
Yeah, again, it's just more horse shit. Scientists take notes for years and years. They say, this is, they put it all together, and that's all there is. There's nothing else to it. You either get the right answer or you get a wrong answer. It's really not that complicated. Or you get the right answer for the wrong reasons. Maxwell.
Fresh, free of problems that they don't see, many logical problems, many philosophical problems, many model problems.
Yeah, maybe you ought to spend more time detailing those. And I mean detailing, like give them some kind of form, more than this ambiguous, well, there's no infinity in your model. You can't have a model without infinity in it.
Predict that the next model that's going to be accepted will be known by others. It's not going to be somebody just plumping down a piece of paper and saying, here we go.
Yeah, well, frankly, you're just so wrong. That's exactly how it's going to happen.
And those who only work in isolation today have a high probability of failure in the long-term future.
Prove it. Demonstrate with one shred of evidence. Show me the shred of evidence somewhere. Where do you have evidence in all of human history that this is the truth? Where? Where?
Sure. I think that's absolutely true. The idea that one person's going to come along and put it all together, I just think it's very difficult. I think, yes.
Why? Again, it's a model. It's like designing a car. Designing this. I mean, how does even having two people working on it help in any way? because it's sort of a methodical process of piling facts on top of each other to see it. And I just don't, it has to be seen in somebody has to see it. They say Tesla could do that. He could see things, visualize them. And he visualized things before he made them. He visualized them. You can't do that with somebody.
A person's work could end up, that started out in isolation, could end up very well being a person with a model, will in fact sort of win it out. But
oh yeah, he could be, but he can't be. So he just contradicted himself. Oh, I predicted this isn't going to happen, but well, maybe it could happen. Brilliant. Wishy-washy.
I think that person's going to have a really hard chance, or an impossible chance, if they just sit and work on their own and don't.
More mush. Sit and work on their own. Again, as opposed to what? Inviting the family over for experiment day.
Network with anybody else. I think that's, in my opinion.
Again, network how? How do you network with somebody else who you don't agree with? How do you do that exactly? Oh, that's right. That ain't going to work.
Very unlikely. But, don't take my word for it. Think about these things.
Yes, exactly. Don't take his word for it because he's an idiot. Okay, so enough of that crap. Yeah, that was unpleasant. So anyway, so what do I was going to do maybe some drawing, but there's no point. It's a simple argument, and I guess all I have to do is the 3 videos: gravity, magnetism, electricity, and that's it. I mean, those are the 3 big subjects. Everything fits into one of those somehow or another. Every phenomenon is in some way or other a manifestation of what you think is elementally happening. And I've sort of made these key points before, but okay, you have all of these forces moving the speed of light. Now, electricity wants to. I mean, it comes close, but you can sort of understand why it's a little slower, is because it's got to go through the atom. So yeah, that slows it down a little. But the force itself probably is moving the speed of light. The big thing that I've pointed out is that the conventional theory doesn't play with energy in any kind of rational way, because it created this pull thing. And the pull thing doesn't have any, where does it go? Where is this pull? Where all this stuff you're pulling, what happens to it? And it completely doesn't account for the real consequence of the force is, which is pressure, that atoms are pressurized. That's why they're made inside of highly pressurized suns, is because the atoms themselves have to be in very high pressure to be arranged and to become durable. And there's a huge amount of energy in the atoms, which is demonstrated by you break them into pieces, into 2 clumps, and 3 neutrons pop out. Okay, and with that 3 neutrons equals a ton of energy. So obviously there was a lot of energy, stuff moving the speed of light, force, inside of that configuration. And when you broke it into 2 pieces, you released some of that. You gave some of it, you freed it, you depressurized it. By creating 2 smaller atoms, you depressurized the arrangement in total, and it lost a little pressure, and the pressure is in the form of this force. And this is clearly obvious, right? I mean, the sun is hot as hell. Why? Because it's under a lot of pressure. All the stuff on the surface is still moving 70 meters per second, and that pressure is being felt by everything next to that, and everything's getting pushed from opposite directions. Tremendous amount of pressure. The same thing's happening to the Earth. Gravity is heating the inside of the Earth. That's the consequence of this force. There's no rational way to say that happens from pulling, from every little atom pulling, with this magical pull force. It just doesn't make any sense at all. And once you acknowledge that gravity is the same as the cosmic background radiation, just in a form we can't detect with a radio transmitter, it's not at the right frequency, so we can't detect it, but that's what it's doing. It's making itself known, obviously, and it makes itself known in exactly the way you would expect if it was a radiant force, in that it's absorbed. A certain amount of it's reflected, a certain amount is absorbed, causes a certain amount of momentum. Each little atom is getting hit by the force, or else it's getting hit by a neighbor who got hit by the force, which is the same thing. Pressurized. And that's holding everything together. Is the external pressure is pushing everything together. Nothing's together because it wants to be together. It's being pushed together. There's force trapped between the electrons because that's what makes them repulsive. And so now to get to magnetism, all you have to do is recognize that the force has two varieties. One that's repulsive to electrons and one's repulsive to protons. So if two protons try to get next to each other, there's this repulsive force that's stuck between them. And the closer you bring them together, the more they reflect, the more pressure they create. The more bounces means more pressure. More bounces means more pressure. So you just increase energy by decreasing proximity. You make them closer together, you're going to increase the energy because there's more pressure, more impacts. And it provides a perfectly logical explanation for why there's repulsion. And then you just figure out that attraction is just the inverse, in the sense that if you have a mechanism that lets the force leak out, the electrons let the proton force leak out, the protons let the electron force leak out perpendicularly, that none of it can get trapped, and then the things will get pushed together easy. There, you've solved it all. It's all right there, in terms of a mechanism. It explains that there's two kinds of stuff in the universe. There's the force bits moving the speed of light, and there's the matter bits that don't move anything unless they're pushed by the force. And you've explained it all. That's the element of this game, and it's just such an obvious, it's so simple, and it's so consistent in terms of it can explain everything we see. Easy, well, completely. And so this really shouldn't be a battle at all, because I don't think a rational argument can be made why that doesn't work. Two forces, plus and minus, two elemental material bits, proton, electron. Done. So anyway, again, I'll post a link to the magnetism video, please. Somebody who's going to say, oh, it can't work, well, explain how it doesn't work. How it doesn't perfectly explain why magnets behave the way they do. Alright, anyway. So, enough. Until the next time and such. The other thing that was interesting is the rational science guy, Bill Gates. He did talk to a physicist on some Canadian guy's show. I guess he's Canadian. Which is a nice opportunity, but it seemed to me totally squandered, because all they did was argue, and I think more for Bill's fault than anything else, semantics. He wants them to give him a drawing of their theory, and obviously they don't do that. Their drawings are all just mathematical formulas that basically detail effects. They don't do anything with causes. They don't have causes. They just say something like, look, space is bent. There's no cause there. And bent space in 3 dimensions mean you just have a convergence. The opposite of the sun radiating. You have some sort of opposite thing where something sucks rays. And that's all they got for gravity. They got virtual photon for magnetism, but the virtual photon doesn't have any identity, doesn't have any function. They can't say how it does what it does. They just say There's something moving the speed of light that's doing it, but we have no idea how it does it. So they have nothing. They can't draw you a picture of it because they don't have any clue how the virtual photon creates attraction one minute and repulsion another. Because they don't have any model. They don't have any, there's nothing. They got nothing. All they have is effects. So they formalized effects into math, and they think that's an explanation. And yes, that's not. But there's no point in arguing it with them, because they don't have models that in the physical form. So there's no point in saying, just constantly arguing, well, you don't have a physical model. Yeah, they'll have to concede they don't have one. They don't have a physical model. They call something a particle, and they really mean it's a wavicle. It's not a particle. It's not some sort of discrete thing. It's some sort of, like a photon is doing this. They call a photon a particle, and that it's doing all this crap. It's not a particle. Just a misuse of words. So yeah, they're guilty of saying stupid things, like calling it particle physics when it's really wave physics. Lying, essentially. Talking about a bent space when they mean bent ether, because there is no such thing as a bent nothing, and space is nothing. So yeah, their rhetoric sucks. But the real point is what you really have to argue is, can a rope theory explain it? And is that just another made-up mechanism? A rope, some idea of connecting every atom in the universe with more rope than would add up to the mass of the atom itself. So there's more mass in the form of rope than there is mass in the form of atoms. I mean, this whole thing is just, again, just made up. And you can find the huge flaws in it when he has to explain something like magnetism. But then he's back to the Deneu effect. He has these ropes spinning around everything. Zillions of ropes doing all this motion to create a little tiny bit of inward pressure, attraction. Well, that's not how magnets work. I mean, do you really think magnets are creating 1 trillion times more swirly energy for every little bit of Newtonian force it creates as repulsion or attraction? I mean, it's nonsensical, and it doesn't work at all when you start smashing things really close. You can't smash two vortices into each other. It won't work. So it's just crap. So anyway, I'm sorry. I mean, there's certain rules of logic, and I just think nobody wants to obey wants to have anything called a logical or rational conversation. The fact that conventional physics has jumped way past evidence, that their evidence is insanely weak, and yet none of them will admit they have weak evidence. It's just amazing. When it's obviously weak. It's obviously they can't draw you a picture of it. It's so weak. Their model. Ugh. Anyway. Till the next time. And such. Yeah, there's only one Professor Lewin video left. I mean, one that's a real part of the lecture. The last video is just him talking about his ballooning days. I mean, it has physics in it, but it's, X-ray emissions from, quasars. Not a terribly interesting subject. So anyway, till the next time and such.